Hello everybody and welcome back to the Blossom Review. How are you? Today we'll be, I don't know if I should say reviewing or analyzing Fuji TV's The Beginning of the Sea, which you can also find on Viki as Where Does the Sea Begin? Umi no Hajimari. This is a very particular show and we need to talk about it for a lot of different reasons. So if you ask me what Umi no Hajimari, so what The Beginning of the Sea is about, I will tell you that it is about the effects of our decisions. It is about how our decisions can influence others, can influence people that we've never met, can influence our loved ones, and how our decisions can end up changing other people's lives. I think it's a show about allowing ourselves and others the right to choose, and it's about respecting other people's decisions. I think that The Beginning of the Sea, despite its apparent cuteness and sentimentality, it is a cautionary tale. It is brutal and realistic. It is a show in which one of its most important characters is a villain who always get what they want, never get to feel any regret over their choices, over their mistakes. So it's a show that I have very mixed feelings about, and I want to talk to you today. Why do I have these mixed feelings? And I want to hear from you. I want to hear your opinion. So make sure to share in the comments what you thought of the show as well. But stay with me, hear me out, and let's see if we see eye to eye or not. Maybe you saw the show differently. So The Beginning of the Sea was a show created by the same creative team, so the same writer and directors as Fuji TV's beloved Silent, which was a very popular show a couple of years ago. So a lot of people were actually looking forward to The Beginning of the Sea. And the official synopsis for it is that this is the story of Tsukioka Natsu, played by Meguro Ren. He is a 28-year-old man who finds out that he is actually the father of a 7-year-old child when he goes to his ex-girlfriend's funeral. So he attends her funeral, and there he finds out that he has a child. So this is the official synopsis. As you know, you see that Natsu here is the protagonist, is the main character. If you were to ask me to write a synopsis for the show, I would say that this is actually Nagumo Mizuki's story. Mizuki is played by Furukawa Kotoni. When she was at university, she finds out that she's pregnant with her then boyfriend's baby, her boyfriend being Tsukioka Natsu, played by Meguro Ren. She decides to abort the baby, and so she goes to him with an abortion form, because in Japan women can abort children up to before a specific amount of weeks. I don't know exactly the details, but I know that for them to abort a child, both the mother and the father of the child, or the future child, they need to sign an abortion form. So she goes to her boyfriend, she goes to Natsu with an abortion form and asks him to sign it. Natsu is heartbroken, but he respects her decision. He signs the form. He goes to the clinic with her. He asks her how she is all the time. So he's very caring, very sweet. But then Mizuki changes her mind and she decides to have the baby behind his back. So she breaks up with him. She tells him that she is now in love with somebody else. She completely disappears from his life and she decides to raise this child on her own. okay? 7 years later, she finds out that she's very sick and she dies. So her family contacts Natsu to invite him to the funeral. He goes to the funeral, and there her family informs him that he is the father of Mizuki's 7-year-old daughter, Umi, played by Izutani Rana. So Natsu, who is now living, let's say, a normal life, he has a stable job, he has a nice girlfriend, he has his life upended pretty much by the discovery that he's in fact a father. So you can see that in this new synopsis, so in this synopsis that I'm giving you, Natsu is not the main character anymore. Mizuki is the main character. Because despite the Meguro-ren selling point of the beginning of the sea, that's the core of the beginning of the sea. This is Mizuki's tale and Mizuki's life, around which all other characters are forced to orbit. So you have everybody orbiting Mizuki, pretty much. Does this make for a satisfying watch? It depends. It depends on what you want. It depends on what you believe in. It depends on how I think you read the show. My reading of the show is that this is, technically speaking, this is a very well-crafted show, but I don't really agree with the messages that the show, or how they deliver the messages. I didn't really understand the messages that they wanted to convey with the beginning of the sea. And that's why I'm here, and that's why I am creating this video, because I want to hear from you guys, and I want to see if you guys understood something different than me. So Mizuki she describes herself as my own pace kind of girl. She is shown as a very strong and independent young woman who is openly dogmatic about her own beliefs. So Mizuki believes that she has the right to do and say whatever she believes is right. And she also reserves herself the right to assume what others think and feel. So you can say that Mizuki is a person with a very, very strong personality. But the thing is, Mizuki starts as a dogmatic character, but slowly you realize that Mizuki is not dogmatic. Mizuki is selfish and arrogant and stubborn. So it soon becomes clear that Mizuki is the catalyst for every single event in the beginning of the sea. Without Mizuki, nothing else would ever happen in the show. She fails to realize that she doesn't live in Mizuki's world. She lives in a society in which everyone's rights should coexist. So she just, she thinks she has the right to decide everything on behalf of everyone at all times. And she's completely right to do so. She's always seen as the victim of the situation. And she's so fantastically incredible that everybody keeps talking about her as if she was perfect. And as if her personality was, she just had a quirky personality. And that forces people who are outside her immediate circle to feel like they're constantly living in her shadow. So since this is the Mizuki show, everybody else is forced to face the consequences of her actions. So she never gets to deal with the consequences of her own actions. It's everybody else who outlived her who now have to decide what to do and where to go. So the beginning of the sea becomes a melodrama in which the most important character is sort of a villain, a young woman who is egotistical and manipulative. She never gets to regret her one-sided decisions. And this was something that annoyed me a lot. At some point during the show, she writes a letter to a character she never met in life, okay? And in the letter, she starts a letter apologizing for putting that person in that situation because she is surrounded, or that character is surrounded by her parents and Natsu and this person and that person. They are all problematic. So she starts listing everybody's flaws. It's funny because you see Mizuki criticize everybody but herself. She never reflects on her own actions, but she thinks she has the right to point at other people's flaws. Well, and then the beginning of the sea doesn't really offer, and then you say, but Karen, maybe she regrets at the end. She doesn't. She has no redemption arc because the show doesn't believe that she needs a redemption arc. She is the hero and the victim to the very last episode. Because, oh, poor thing, she was a single mother. Oh, poor thing, it was a sacrifice because she didn't want to impose anything on Natsu. That's why she didn't tell him. Like, things don't really make sense. A lot of things don't make sense in this show. But then we get to the point of the story that, of course, you can say, Karen, but maybe they wanted to create a show in which the main character, the protagonist or the most important character had this sort of personality, and that's the point that they wanted to explore. Yes, maybe they wanted to explore the fact that some people believe that they can do whatever they want, and everybody else just has to put up with it. Maybe, yeah, like I said, it's a realistic show in some ways. But my real problem with the beginning of the sea is that the show twists very important messages that should be openly discussed and explored and not distorted. So let's start with the basic premise, okay? When Mizuki tells Natsu that she's pregnant, it's not that she sits down with him and discusses the situation. No, she sits down, she places an abortion form in front of him and asks him to sign it. That's it, that's the conversation. And Natsu, of course, is taken aback. And his immediate reaction was, look, if you think this is your only option, we can talk about it, we can discuss it, we can find a different solution together. But then Mizuki comes to him and says, it's my body, so it's my decision to make, and this is what I want to do. Natsu is heartbroken, but he understands her and he respects her decision. So you see that he's very hesitant, but he signs the form. And he even apologizes to her because he feels bad that he didn't realize that, she had been thinking about this for a while, that, she had been struggling with that situation. And then Natsu goes to the clinic with her, takes care of her. You notice that he's willing to help, to support her as much as he can. And then what does Mizuki do? Mizuki decides to have the baby behind his back and then decides to break up with him over the phone by saying a bunch of awful, hurtful things to him, saying that, she's in love with somebody else, she's now in a different relationship, and, she loves this new person much more than she ever liked Natsu. Natsu, of course, at first tries to talk her out of it, because I think that's your immediate reaction if you are in a good relationship and the person turns to you and says, let's break up. So at first you're like, but wait, we can talk about this. So at first he tries to talk her out of it, but of course, ultimately he respects her decision. She doesn't want to be with me. Okay, what can I do about it? So here you have a man who respects his partner's decisions, opinions. He tries to be as supportive as he can. He's not some sort of possessive boyfriend who sees her as a plaything. He doesn't, stalk her, beg her to come back, go to this new boyfriend of hers to pick a fight. No, he respects her decisions at all times. And of course, he doesn't require proof of anything because he believed that they were in a loving, respectful, and trusting relationship. Mizuki, on the other hand, lies to him constantly, doesn't allow him to participate in any decisions that involve the child, denies him the right to make a decision on whether he wants to participate in the upbringing of this child. And after she dies, she is constantly shown as the poor victim, the struggling single mother. And Natsu is shown as this sort of criminal, an aloof, heartless, and immature boyfriend who wasn't there when Mizuki needed him most. I think it's also important to mention here that Mizuki received unwavering support from her parents. Her parents wanted her to have the baby and they were willing to help her raise this baby, okay? So I'm making this extra note here because meanwhile, the show reveals that Natsu's current girlfriend, Momozi Yaoi, who is played by Arimura Kazumi, she went through a very similar situation in her past. However, Yaoi wanted to have the baby, but she received zero support from her partner and from her parents. So you find out that Yaoi found out that she was pregnant, and then she goes to her then partner to try to discuss the situation and observe the difference, okay? So Mizuki, when she goes to talk to Natsu about the baby, what does she do? She sits down and puts an abortion form in front of him. Meanwhile, Yaoi, when she goes to talk to her partner about their baby, she sits down and she places an ultrasound in front of him. So do you see the difference? So she places the ultrasound because she wanted to have the baby, but her partner immediately shuts her down and pretty much takes for granted that she's aborting the child. And then she's heartbroken, she goes home, calls her mom, and her mom is completely indifferent. She says, well, your boyfriend told you to abort it, just abort and make sure that he pays for everything. Because if you decide to have this baby, we're not gonna support you. So Yaoi is a young woman, or she was at that moment, she was a young woman that finds herself completely alone. She doesn't have anybody. So, of course, she feels like this is her only option. She's gonna have to abort the child, and she does. But that incident leads to this lifetime of guilt. Of course, it's a scar that she carries with her forever. And she nurtures this dream of becoming a mother one day. But you notice that she feels a lot of guilt because she really wanted to be a mom. So even though Yaoi's experience is very much valid, and it is something that happens to women around the world, the beginning of the sea decides to downplay her situation and instead victimize Mizuki as a single mother. Look, single mothers, they deserve all the respect and all the praise that we can give them. But the beginning of the sea, instead of celebrating these women and saying, let's talk about the problems that they face, the beginning of the sea decides to completely distort the situation. So in the real world, single mothers, many single mothers out there, they don't receive any support from their family. They don't really have a support system. They don't have friends to support them. They don't have flexible workplaces that allow them to bring their child to work or allow them to leave earlier. Often the father of their children is not supportive, is not helpful, or maybe he doesn't want to have anything to do with the upbringing of that child. And despite all of these single mothers, they do their very best to raise their children in warm and healthy environments. They do their very best to take care of their children and take care of themselves. Meanwhile, Mizuki, the single mother who is constantly victimized in the show, she has loving parents who are willing to help her, who have a lovely house, who have the means to help her raise this child. She has friends who are willing to help. She has a flexible and child-friendly workplace that allows her to take her child to work, to change shifts with her co-workers, with her colleagues. And of course, the father of her child is a kind-hearted man who would be more than happy to help if he knew the baby actually existed. So Mizuki is constantly shown as this single mother in profound hardship when she made that choice herself. And I think this is offensive. It is offensive for single mothers who never had a choice. And they are doing their best. And meanwhile, you have everybody victimizing this girl who had all sorts of means around her, who had a strong support system around her. And everybody talks about her as if she's like a little poor thing. I think her situation is so awfully exaggerated that I found absurd that there is at some point in the story, one of the dialogues between characters, they sort of suggest that Mizuki, because Mizuki was a single mother, she didn't have the time or the means to go to the hospital for regular checks, as she should have done. And that's why she only found out about her illness when it was too late, and that's why she dies. So I found that so absurd that I couldn't believe it. It's like you can't say that. So these scenes, they don't work with me for a simple reason. These scenes, these storylines, they belittle the efforts of millions and millions of women around the world. They belittle the efforts of single mothers who never really had a choice and now need help. They belittle the efforts of single women who want to have a baby, but they can't, or they don't have enough support, or they belittle the efforts of millions and millions and millions of women around the world who just want, their bodies and their choices to be respected by men. It belittles the efforts of women who are fighting to get out of abusive relationships in which men, their partners believe that they are possession, in which partners are obsessive. It is just sad because it's not cool. So I was really angry while watching it, to be honest, because instead of commending Natsu's behavior as a green flag, the guy is a green flag. So instead of commending his attitude as a considerate partner, a partner who respects his girlfriend's choices and decisions, and exploring the individualistic choices that Mizuki made and the fallout of these choices, the beginning of the sea lets his characters pile criticism over criticism upon Natsu's situation. And they constantly make a martyr of Mizuki. Instead of exploring the harsh decisions that all women have to make during their lifetime, the beginning of the sea decides to victimize one woman over another. And this is not what we need right now. This is not the message that we need to tell people. And it doesn't stop there. In episode 7, for example, you have Mizuki and Yaoi in a conversation with Mizuki's colleague, Tsuno, played by Kematsu Sosuke. In this conversation, both women sort of reprimand Tsuno for his sexist comments, because they explain to Tsuno that society wrongly associates unconditional love with motherhood and wrongly expects motherhood to be this basic instinct in women when it's not. On the other hand, men are not expected to have an intrinsic sense of fatherhood. Men are not expected to be naturally fathers. And even if this idea of fatherhood is raised, this idea of fatherhood is never associated with care. So we always say motherly love or motherly care, but not fatherly. Even though the idea is completely right, because it is. You guys can watch the video on Family by Choice. We talked about destroying these masculinity and fatherhood tropes there. Family by Choice did deliver this message very, very well. The overall story doesn't really exemplify this belief. So, for example, there is a scene in which Natsu accompanies Mizuki, who is pregnant, to the clinic before the abortion. You see that Natsu is feeling terrible. He's feeling nervous and he's sort of like, are you sure you're gonna do this? And then Mizuki turns to him and says, you shouldn't feel responsible because you're not a father yet. Excuse me? So you are already a mother, but he isn't a father? So surely if parental love is not automatic, if unconditional love is not automatically associated with motherhood, and motherhood is not a basic female instinct, then a man can feel worried and responsible for an unborn baby, right? So if this is not a basic instinct for women, and is not a basic instinct for men, and this is just an emotion that human beings develop, then men can also develop this emotion, right? Apparently not. And I think it's funny that even during later episodes, you see that it takes a village to raise a child becomes sort of a running theme of the story. And then they try to sell this idea that, raising a child is not something that mothers should do alone. It's something that requires more people. It's something that, should be the responsibility of both parties. But then for a story in which everybody is praising a woman who denied the father of her child the right to raise his child, their child, this message sort of falls in deaf ears. I mean, why would I care? Why would I believe in a belief or in a theme in the story if you're not actively showing me this theme in the narrative? It's not like Mizuki ever regrets this decision. Even like in the last episode, in which Natsu reads the letter that Mizuki wrote for him, she says she doesn't regret her decision at all. And then this sort of highlights the point that Mizuki never found important for her daughter to have a father. Throughout the show, you see that the father role is completely dismissed. And then even at the end, you see that Umi never refers to Natsu as her father. She refers to him as Natsu-kun all the time, which is a way to, a friendly way to refer to a young man. So the father role is never taken seriously in the show. It's never seen as important in the show. I think the message, I don't know if that was the message that the show wanted to convey or not. I really don't know. But the message that we should be talking about here is if men want to become fathers, they should be encouraged to be supportive and emotionally open. fathers should be able to participate in the raising of a child. But communication is not the strong point, the strong suit of the beginning of the sea. You notice that communication is often broken, and you start with Natsu, who isn't assertive at all, and then you have a bunch of characters who don't really make an effort to establish a line of communication with him. I think that as everybody is sort of dragged around, carried away by the flow of Mizuki's emotions, you know, the words that they share, they are full of pain and anger, because they are trying to do their best with the limited knowledge that they have of the people around them, of you know, the situations, of the experiences that they had in the past, and also they are trying to do their best within the constraints of the circumstances. And of course, much of what they say comes from a place of profound heartbreak. And this heartbreak comes from grief. And it's funny because for a show that, you know, for a show whose main character, one of the main characters, dies, and this is something that, you know, comes up in the show all the time. Mizuki is always present. Her death is a constant theme in the show. Grief is a second thought, and is only brought up when other characters want to compete with Natsu to see who is hurting more. So there is no grieving process. Grief is not something that is explored at any point during the show. It sort of pops up, but it's not properly explored. What I find sad is that they use grief as an excuse for people's meanness, and, you know, as if, you know, grief gives you the right to offend people. It's because they are grieving, it's because they are sad. And it sort of goes back to, I think, the only clear theme in this show is that everyone has the right to do whatever they want as long as it makes them happy. Which is not okay, you know, you're not, like I said before, we live in a society. Now, from a technical point of view, The Beginning of the Sea is a well-crafted show. The script is very melancholic, very slow-paced, but it was clearly designed with, let's say, a 3-act structure in mind. So the script does not focus on character development. Let's say it focuses on a character triumph, let's say. So the show focuses on Natsu's journey towards fatherhood. That's pretty much it. Because you notice that none of the characters in the show really have a character arc. All the characters start and end the show roughly as the same person. So the only thing that you really see happening is this journey that Natsu has towards fatherhood. So let's say you have 3 acts in which Natsu finds out that he's actually a father. He needs to adapt and understand how to become a father. And then, of course, Natsu and Umi start a new life together as father and daughter. So that's pretty much the script. Now, when it comes, so the structure is sound, let's say, but the dialogue sometimes doesn't sound as natural, to be honest, purely because, especially the emotional dialogues. Because it's funny how if you look at the dialogues between adults and the dialogues between the adults and Umi, the child in the show, you notice that the pattern, especially in emotional, intense dialogues, the pattern of the dialogue is the same, as if the 7-year-old child has the exact same emotional maturity as all the adults in the show. So it is kind of strange to watch that, especially in the last few episodes. But it is a show in which the directing was incredibly well done. So excellent directing. I think the muted colors and the very, very detailed set design, they are 2 things that really stand out, that are really 2 elements that are really eye-catching in the show. Also, I think that, well, cinematography is beautiful. The performances are great. I think we have to offer a special shout out to little Izutani Ranna, who is incredibly cute. Meguro Ren, who had to cry non-stop in the last few episodes. Arimura Kazumi, who had to hide this pain that her character carries while trying to be as kind as possible. And also, to be honest, Ikematsu Sosuke, whose character mixes grief and kindness and anger, and it's really nice to see Ikematsu's performance in the show. I think a very memorable scene for me is one that you see how well made the show is when it comes to, the technical aspect of it. The scene in which Tsuno receives the news that Mizuki died. The scene is just a couple of minutes long, but the sequence only has 3 different shots. So there is a wide shot, an insert, and a medium shot, okay? The dialogue is just one line. So it's one line. He says, "Hi," which is yes when you pick up the phone. His performance is just unbelievable. It's just so emotionally resonant. You feel his pain when he receives that phone call. I think anybody who has received this sort of phone call will immediately connect to that scene, because you see that he goes from fear when he looks at the phone, from fear, anxiety, to profound despair, to like this profound grief and sorrow. It's a fantastic scene. So technically speaking, it's a very, very well crafted show. Now, if you are looking for a melancholic series and you just disagree with everything that I've said here today, and maybe you see something else in the story, maybe The Beginning of the Sea is the show for you. Now, I think it is, like I said before, it is a cautionary tale of how we may end up wrapped up in other people's whims. It reminds us that our choices, every single one of our choices, carries weight, and our decisions influence not just our own lives, but the lives of people around us, influences the lives of people that we don't even know. So we need to be very careful when we make decisions. So personally, it is a very brutal cautionary tale that I won't be rewatching. Now, if you want to give it a shot, The Beginning of the Sea is on Viki. So guys, I swear that I love Japanese television. It's just that lately, I don't know what's been happening. I haven't been able to find a show that I really connect with. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you. Tell me in the comments what you thought of The Beginning of the Sea, if you've watched it or if you want to watch it in the future. And so on the Blossom Review, we posted this review yesterday in article format. And next week, make sure to come back for another review. Next week is Christmas. So, well, if you celebrate it, I hope you are excited to enjoy your Christmas. If you don't, just take care of yourself. And, well, I hope you have a lovely day. Thank you so very much for stopping by. Make sure to stop by the Blossom Review. We always have new articles every Wednesday and every other Friday. Our newsletter is also, you can find the link in the description. And I hope you have a fantastic day today. And well, I'll see you next Thursday, I hope. So take care of yourself. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you soon. Thank you so much. I hope you like and subscribe. Thank you.